Hello everyone, welcome to my Session 7 teaching memo. You all should be well rested after getting an extra hour of sleep Saturday night. So I'm hoping you are very refreshed. My football officiating days are finally over. I worked my last game on Saturday at Castleton University. I had 38 years of some great memories. Next week, I will be on the sideline for what I thought was going to be my last game at the Coast Guard Academy. It's going to be on ESPN3 if you're interested in watching, which I'm sure you're not. The Coast Guard Academy is playing Merchant Marine for the Secretary's Cup. And I will be there on the sidelines. I cannot work the game because the Merchant Marine coach asked that I be removed. Questioning my integrity, I guess, that figured I couldn't, because I'm an alum, I graduated from the academy, felt that I couldn't be fair. So I was a little upset at the time, but I've made peace with it. My family's going to be there, and I'm really looking forward to having a great time. So, not much housekeeping this week. We had a couple of weeks without a discussion board or a written assignment. But that will change this week. I see almost all of you. I know almost all of you in my section 64020 course have submitted their initial draft of this select response test. And I'm going to talk more about that in the session 7 part because I've seen a lot of mistakes that are common, and there's a main reason for that. One, you haven't watched my test creation process video. Two, you haven't read Chapui et al. Pages 136 to 138, and I will get to that. And you have not looked at the exemplars, which have clear, specific learning targets, and I believe they all have reasoning targets and at least 5 reasoning questions. So we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, let's talk about session 7. All of you should have finished your first draft select a response test by now. If you haven't, get going. This is very important because this is now become a group project where you take the tests of your fellow group mates. And if you don't post your test, your group mates can't take it. And once this session is moved on, you're going to be out of luck. People are going to be on to revising their test and taking the new test, taking the revised tests of their new group mates. And I'll talk about that a little later as well. So get them done. This is not a time where you can lollygag and say, oh, I can do this in a couple of weeks when I have more time, because you're going to lose out. And you need to get results of your test so you can write the analytic summary at the end, where you talk about your test results and how your candidates did and how you analyze those results. You talk about the test creation process, what you did in the beginning, what mistakes you made, the feedback you got, and how you used some of the materials, resources to make that better. So this is the process that you're going to reflect on and submit the last week of the course. So it's very important that you do that. As I said, many of you obviously did not look at the item writing guidelines. Now those are in Chapui chapter 4. Let me see if I have that up here. I do. There they are, page 136 to page 138, guidelines for writing quality items. I am correcting these over and over again. You're making the same mistakes. One of the things I'm not going to go over these now because you need to read it, but for your multiple choice questions, they have to be in a form of a question. Some of you are leaving blanks. Some of you are just making a statement. Excuse me. So make sure you look at this. I'm giving you the feedback, but it's really becoming tedious. A lot of you are making mistakes on your learning targets. I have provided you with verbs for behavioral targets. You will not find the verb understand or appreciate or demonstrate knowledge. You will not find that in this list. You'll find they're separated by both higher order thinking and by subject matter. So these are the verbs you should be using because they're specific and you can measure them. Many of you are providing a scenario and then asking which level of the rubric is. That's good, but that also takes a lot of time and a lot of because in order for someone to say this is, you have to provide a lot of information for it to be a 5. Now, what I would prefer is the question that I think it's the question I provided last week, where the person says, in order to receive a level 4 on using feedback to guide further learning rubric or whatever number rubric that is, which of the following would make more sense? That way, you don't have to provide all of the information. You just say, yeah, this one's a better choice, or this one is the best choice, because that's what making an inference is. So I'm just giving you this hint because part of the rubric is writing higher order thinking questions. You also have to make sure that your questions align with your learning target. So some of you have learning targets and your questions have nothing to do with them. You're just going into section 1, section 2, section 3 assessment, section 2 planning, section 1 planning, section 2 teaching. I'm also often seeing, you only assessing one target with one type of question, and that's okay. I mean, you're not going to lose points for that, but in the future, in your own test creation, you won't know if a student is struggling with that question type. Like a lot of people struggle with true false. A lot of people struggle with fill in the blanks. By the way, there's no word bank for fill in the blanks. But you won't know that if you have all of one type for assessing all of one learning target, whether it's the content or the question type. So that's my advice to many of you. Make sure you look at my feedback. I have comments on your Word document. One of you submitted, I prefer you don't submit a PDF file, but I can make comments on that. It's just a little trickier. So check your comments, make sure you download it. Also in section 8, you're going to be doing another discussion board, and I'll explain that's going to be a little different than this one. Several of you commented on the bias quiz with questions. One of them was about the empirical versus judgment methods of determining bias. You can read about that on Popham 2017 on pages 132 and 135. I've received several emails about the quiz, and I'm answering them because that's the kind of person I am, but I'd rather have you go on the quiz discussion board so everyone gets the benefit of your question. I will go on there occasionally and I will give you hints or point you in the right direction, but many of you are emailing me rather than going on the quiz discussion board. So I had one question on empirical versus judgmental. That's one of the questions. I had another one that was about, I think, President Obama's, it was a statement of something he did a couple years ago. That you find that in my presentation. Somebody felt that it was just on chapter 5. It's on session 6. So anything in session 6, most of it, matter of fact, almost all of it is on chapter 5. But I did put one question in there, so you would have to watch my presentation. Sorry. There also was question 3. Most people had a problem with question 3. If you got one wrong, it was question 3, because you immediately said, oh yeah, offending a group is bias. But that's not the only way of bias. See, with true-false questions, that's the problem with them. The whole question has to be true in order for a test to be biased. Well, there is another method for a test to be biased. It isn't just being offensive. So that's where you have to. That's where the question falls down. Just remember that large-scale tests usually have a bias review panel where I know I've received things from Pearson because I teach assessment, or they want to know about the EAS, Educating All Students test. Matter of fact, I just received a notice on that and went through and said, are these topics reasonable for a starting teacher? And so that's what a validity panel is. A bias review panel is the same way. They look at the questions and say, are these offensive, or do they put somebody at a disadvantage? Okay, that's it for my housekeeping in session 6 video. I'll be back with more on session 8.